Still technically, as my mom would say, just sent a bunch of money to a stranger online. What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the Nicest Nick podcast and YouTube channel. Super excited to get started today. And today we're diving into something kind of wild. So for those of you who don't know, when we started the channel, the whole goal was, I want to highlight all these people doing nice things or awesome stuff for the planet to get, two things to happen. One, how do we get people more involved in doing those things, right? You see them, you get inspired, you're like, oh, I could do this, I could be this change maker. And then two, we go participate in those things, right? So we can check off all these nice deeds, like in my quest to be the nicest Nick. So obviously when making a channel like this, you have to set some ground rules and say, hey, how do we want to get started? Like you do when you approach any business. So my big rule when I was drafting this out was, hey, I'm no Mr. Beast, not yet, right? But I don't have a ton of capital to just be like throwing out at every single, a lot of causes out there, but let's focus on actually going and helping people because I think that's just more approachable for the day-to-day kind of audience, if you will, right? Like you might not feel that you're in the place right now where you can just write a blanket check to like a nonprofit you love to support, but you might be able to spend the weekend helping them out and volunteering, right? So that's kind of what the mindset of the channel was when I got started. So while this was going on, I get this Discord message from one of my buddies, and he goes, hey, having the worst day I've had in a long time, stuck at a gas station. Like, I don't know what to do. Can't get my car to start. Like, it's just, having a rough time. Wanted to say hi. And I was like, oh, man, this was the moment where I was like, oh, this is the reason why I want to inspire people to do more stuff. Like, I think there's so many weird opportunities that you can, get into as an individual where you alone have the option to make somebody's life different forever, right? That act of goodwill, that act of kindness to step up and say, you know what, I volunteer. I'll be the person to try and make your day a little better today. And, what does that entail? So I was like, oh, man, I'm literally trying to start this YouTube channel that these guys don't know about. And, one of my buddies online who I've never met in person, just some random dude online who, they've been playing games with for a while, is just having a shitty day and needs some help. So I sat there, I was like, man, I really would love to help him. Like what? But it's just some random person online. Like, what do you do? How do you take that initiative to say, what makes someone go from online stranger to, hey, I've had calls with you on Discord. We've played games for a while. Like, is it worth just like sending money away? Like through the, through the magic of the internet, like here, here's, a couple $100 through Venmo, like get your stuff fixed. So I was, it was like caught in the crossroads. And I was like, man, I finally said, I don't think anything is going to get me inspired to start this channel more than one just big act of goodwill to kick things off, right? It's like, this is going to be my chance, my moment to say, look, we're going to do something that will inspire me to tell this story, which will then kick off this whole kind of podcast, YouTube movement, right? So I was like, look, we were trying to like diagnose this problem like over Discord, right? Like, oh, like what's going on with the car? Is it the fluid? Like, can we buy you a water? Like, what can we do to fix your car and get you home? To be that ripple effect of kindness that we all kind of want to see out of the world. And here's, I'll spare you all the details, but what kind of boiled down to is, look, there's something going on. We can't get it to start. Maybe we got to tow it. But how do we get you money now to be able to pay for a tow to just get home, dude? The dude is 6 miles from home, just stuck having a shit day, and like it's up to us, right? This is the time where we can do something magical for a stranger, right? We don't know him in person, to be the change we want to be. So we're like, oh, like how do we do it? How do we do it? And I finally just say, look, man, post your Zelled QR code into chat and like let's get you home. Like let's figure it out. Like I just think this is the moment, right? This can be the catalyst to do something really cool to help somebody today. So he posts it, and he's like, no. He's like, oh, man, like, don't worry about it, but, fine, I'll post it, whatever. And then, the moral of the story is we got him home, right? He went from the worst day he's had in a long time, which is like a terrible, unlucky week, and home safe. Car got there, like he got there, and he can kind of figure out what to do next, all because 4 people that he's never met before on the internet, like, oh, like we're going to take the chance here to try and make somebody's day, a little bit better. And I was like, man, that is what I just think inspired me to get this so ramped up is it's crazy what you can do for just that one person, right? And that means if all the acts, all the videos, just get a few people to say, hey, I can do something myself to make the world such a better place. I think that's my true goal for this channel, right? Where it's like, you can just highlight all the cool stuff people have been doing to change one person's mind, because that one person might change one other person's mind, and your efforts just triangle out, right? And suddenly it's a whole bunch of people doing better stuff to make the world a little less crazy. And I just think that's what we need right now with so much going on. In reality, there's some crazy cool things happening that just need to be brought into the light, right? So because I did what I swore to not do, right? I was like, no matter what, I'm not giving away money. I'm not just writing checks. I'm not sending money to strangers. And the immediate first thing I do is that. So I was like, hey, let's take some time to say, if you're going to do that, if you're going to say, Nick, you know what, my value add to the Nicest community is I would love to just financially help people. What can I do to get there? I was like, well, let's go through some, tips and tricks of what to look out for if that's going to be your choice, right? If you're like, hey, you know what, I don't really want to do the volunteer thing. I don't have enough time. Like, how do I just help financially and shoot some stuff out? So there's a lot of guides and tips out there. If you check check below, I put some links. Like Fidelity has a guide. Like most of the financial planners out there have guides or scam alerts to look out for. And I know it sounds silly, but I would really suggest taking a read or looking at some of these, or at least listening to this, this video or podcast, depending on where you're tuning in, because I know people personally, right, that have been taken advantage of by scams online, which is why I had this whole big thing before I sent money out. I was like, man, is this real? Is kind of what you want to ask yourself, because if not, you're gonna get, you don't want to get burned, right? That's the worst case scenario, right? It's bad for two reasons. Because one, you've sent this money out thinking you're gonna be this good person, and you're gonna be like, yes, I helped somebody today. And then if you don't, you're bummed because you got scammed, right? Because you lost money. And then two, you're extra untrustworthy. So the odds of you wanting to help someone later, is substantially lower, because you're it's probably a scam. You're kind of inherently skeptical, as you should be if you have that kind of stuff happen to you, right? So I was super fortunate. I'll tell you the happy end to our story kind of after going through these tips. But, the person I chose to send money to, was real, not a scam, helped him out. I think that's what inspired me so much to kind of tell this story of, man, you can be this difference maker. But if you're new to this world of hey, how do I help people online? There's a couple easy things to look out for, while you're kind of evaluating your online donation opportunities. And the biggest thing, and as much as I hate this tip, I think you should know it, is, try and donate online through known sources, right? And it sounds obvious, but a lot of folks will get emails or see things on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist where it's hey, I'm so-and-so, I need some help, here's why. And it's a picture of a dilapidated house, and it's I'm gonna lose my house in a week. I need a bunch of money on PayPal. And it's, for those people that are actually in situations where that's their story and it's super sad, yes, we should try and find ways to help folks. That's the end goal. But a lot of times when they're going through routes that aren't common, right? It's kind of odd scenarios or pictures that don't really include them. There's not a lot of detail. That's, it's fake a lot of the times. So you have to just, make sure the story makes sense, make sure it's credible, and then leverage things that kind of validate those for you, right? So another good resource that's down below in the comments, and I'll post it here in the podcast links as well, is things like GoFundMe, right? Or Donors Choose. It's things where it's done a little bit of the validation work for you, right? So the downside, right? Hey, the one-off time where someone's just in a pickle that needs immediate cash, yeah, maybe you miss them. But all the other times, you have these really validated folks that need help and have gone the extra mile to say, hey, look, I will show you what I'm doing and get it validated by this external party to prove to you that, I'm a real person. This is a real issue I'm having. This is a real thing I need to, get funded for. And, and you kind of have some scam protection built in, right? So they have a middle person, right? So Donors Choose, for example, or, holds the funds, make sure it's real. And then, just like GoFundMe, it kind of holds the funds, make sure it's a real thing. Once it's not a scam, it kind of goes through it. And sometimes, sure, maybe things slip through the cracks, don't flame me in the comments, right? But most of the time, that's more protection than you would have versus just giving away money yourself, right? You can have this pre-selected thing, right? So don't do what I did most of the time, right? It's you should do what moves you, but you do it through a lens of, hey, this is kind of protected and done through you. right? And the other thing that comes up a lot in a lot of these online guides is donate to causes, right? Or if you're going to send money away anyway, use tools that don't, that give you a little bit of protection, right? So, Zelled, for example, has been in the news a lot. It's all these scams that are kind of popping up, right? Is impossible to get your cash back. It's like if I handed you $100 and you're like, haha, like great, I'm gonna go do something with this, and you go do whatever you want with that $100. I don't have any recourse, right? There's not anything I can really do to get my money back, or kind of change what I've done, or alter that course, right? The money is sent, it's gone. But there's some PayPal or Venmo do have some clawbacks depending on what it was used for, right? You have a bit of a grace period to kind of catch the scammer, if you will. That being said, still very hard to do, right? The perfect world is, hey, I'm going to start with stuff that's pre-vetted, right? Through like a GoFundMe or a Donors Choose or whatnot, where I trust the platform, right? It's an inherent trust. So if I don't know the individuals, I trust the overall community that we're doing something well. And then it's like, well, if I can't do that and I want to send money regardless, well, I'm going to use a tool where I can kind of at least see how the money gets sent to them, what it does, and if they're kind of violating what they're supposed to be doing with it, I might be able to have some recourse, but not always, right? And the third option, which is, I would call it the tried and true kind of old school option out there, is donate to organizations that fund things you're trying to give back towards, right? So if you're like, hey, I really want to go, help the homeless population in my area, right? Okay, well, I can go donate to a shelter that kind of meets my checklist of hey, here's what I care about a lot. How do I donate to them, right? Which again, if you're like, oh, but Nick, I don't know where to go to help the cause I care about. Welcome to my world, right? That's the point of this channel, where I think a lot of those causes or a lot of those groups need a bit more attention, right? Because keep in mind, they're not spending all of their money on marketing, because they're spending all of their money on trying to help the cause they're related to, which is why people like me are trying to say, look, how do we highlight those voices and bring them up a little bit more, just so we can say, it's really important to kind of dive into these different causes, right? So if that way you say, hey, I really want to donate to dogs, like stray dogs in my area, I want to help no-kill shelters, get more resources, I get more dogs off the street into homes, that means a lot to me. Where do I go to do that? It's a lot easier to support that by saying, I'm going to go find a shelter that I know does that in my area, and go either volunteer time, maybe you're going to send them resources, whatever you're going to do, you can kind of pick instances of people to partner with, right? And maybe if you want to have a ripple effect where it's, hey, I've got 5 causes that matter a lot to me. Here's what I want to focus on. Maybe one year you donate money to one, but donate time to another, and that way you can kind of balance it out, right? You don't have to feel stuck into one particular instance or one particular thing, right? It's up to you to decide, hey, with my extra resources, be it time, money, what have you, you can divide those out how you want them to, right? So there's kind of the 3 big things to look for. Otherwise, I would say the kind of collective fourth point is use your best judgment to know what's real, right? If you're getting weird emails about people saying, the classic, Prince or royalty scam, where, hey, I've got $20,000. If you just send me $1,000, I can wire you the rest. Those are just not real, right? So don't watch out for fake emails or people asking you to send them gift cards, because a lot of times it's just not, you're not going to save someone's mortgage by sending them a whole bunch of Walmart gift cards. Use your, it's really easy to get taken advantage of in the moment where you're like, oh man, I really want to help somebody. But take a step back, always have that, take 20 minutes, take an hour, take a day to sleep on it and say, hey, does this sound right? Is this a logical approach to how I can help this person? Because if you start to second guess it, and maybe it's not, right? And that doesn't mean you do nothing, right? Maybe you just ask them more questions, you get more details, right? There's ways you can kind of work through the process, but you want to make sure if you're going to take the leap to do something kind of nice and exciting, give them a second, right? It's okay to take time to think about it, right? You're not a bad person because you took an extra 2 hours to think something through, right? If you ever feel like you're getting overly pressured to help somebody, it's probably not a real cause, right? Because people that, most of the time, I would say, right, if you're in a situation man, I really need help, right? Even in the situation where my friend was stuck somewhere at a gas station, he was not saying, send me stuff, I'm stuck. He's just like, oh man, I'm having the worst day because I'm stuck here and I don't know what to do. Can we just hang out or can we just chat, right? There's a difference between I'm stuck somewhere and it's not fun, versus you getting like artificially rushed to make a decision. Because most of the time, if you're getting just rushed, they're trying to trick you into giving them money instantly versus just kind of thinking it out, right? So those are kind of my 4 big tips. I wanted to dive into those today because I think there's such a desire out there to do good, right? Hence the point of the channel, hence the point of these stories. And if you're going to do what I did and break your big rule, right? I was like, no matter what happens, I'm not sending money out because I want to show people they can do other stuff. And then I know immediately, right? I get tested where it's, hey, well, what if it's one of your, somebody you kind of know, right? You have this online relationship with, but you never met. Like, what do you do? I was like, man, I think there's always going to be situations you don't plan for, right? So if you're in this moment where it's like, hey, I really feel like I can make a big impact from far away. If I send $20 here and there, but how do I know I'm doing it with the right cause, the right way to do it? I think these tips will at least help you get started, right? And I'm not saying it's the end all be all. Yes, there's a million exceptions to everything online, right? There's just the way things are evolving through TikTok stories and Instagram stories where you're finding people and you kind of help them real time. It's led to this huge boom and people being awesome to each other, which I love, right? But if you look at a lot of these stories as they go viral and as they come up, a lot of them end up going into like a GoFundMe at some point, right? Versus just like blanket, like invisible PayPal donations that are a little bit harder to track. And at the same time, there are some people doing amazing stuff through just PayPal and Venmo donations. So please don't say like, oh, I'm never going to do that again, because, there are some cool creators out there that really leverage that, but they document all of their evidence, right? You have that history where you've built that relationship where you can feel like you trust them because they're showing you what they're doing with your donations. And I just think that's super important, right? Choose transparency over anything else, right? You can say, hey, I gave him or her $30 because I know it's going straight to like feeding the homeless, right? And they're going to go video it and show them, and I'm super excited I can be a part of that, right? Or I'm a Patreon supporter and I know what these videos kind of supply, so great. But most of the time, I would say don't do what I did, right? Where it's like, don't just blanket send it away on like an untraceable platform unless you really know the person, right? Which I was fortunate enough to, have that relationship over a couple of years, right? Where I still technically, as my mom would say, just sent a bunch of money to a stranger online. But at the end of the day, like sometimes that works, right? You got to take the risk, you got to risk it sometimes to do the good deed. And just know if you're going to do that, every once in a while, someone might take advantage of you, and that's what happens. But most of the time, if you go through the steps that we kind of ran through today, you can get a good enough safety net where you're going through the right steps to get something done that will go towards a good deed at the end of the day. So keep in mind, right, quick recap, if you're like, that was a lot of cool information, I want to go, I'm ready, right, I'm ready to start donating, where do I go? Use trusted sources, right? So they kind of help pre-vet the people for you. If you're going to use payment systems to send cash, use things that have some sort of trace or accountability, and you can kind of recall the funds back. And then 3, in a worst case scenario, if you can't do those first 2, see if you have some pre-existing relationship with the person, or be able to ask them questions or engage in conversations where you're not just blanket kind of like throwing money into PayPal accounts here and there. It's like, no, you should kind of know who they are just to make sure you know where they're going with all that, right? So I hope that helps you today. I'm super excited to see where this channel goes. I just thought it would be fun to tell the story of what kind of inspired me to kick this off, right? How you can be at home one day and then magically help someone across the other side of the country with just one act of goodwill. And that is my hope for this channel, right? Where you say, look, I can be the ripple effect that makes the world a really cool and exciting place. So with that being said, right, first episode, telling stories, we're super excited. I've got some really interesting interviews coming up for the podcast and the show in the next couple of weeks. You guys have been really helpful with, providing me in the right direction of guests and people that have inspired you to just kind of do better in life. I would love to do, as always, though, a call out at the end of every video. If you have people that inspire you, be it channels or stores or you name it, drop them in the comments below. I want to know what you're doing every day to make the world a better place, and who else I should chat with on the show to really highlight what people have been up to, right? And how do we have a better conversation of what's going on? So if drop them in. I would love to chat. And Can't wait to keep sharing these stories with you. I'm excited to have our guests starting on the show with our next interview. We're getting it scheduled next week. So, I'll keep it a surprise as we're getting everybody plugged in. But needless to say, we've had some really cool folks kind of reach out to support the show. So excited to see where we take this. And as always, if you could do me a favor and like and subscribe, it does a ton to help grow the channel. And if you're listening on our podcast, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because I cannot tell you enough how much that helps me. So if, keep in mind, right, this whole channel, right, I was like, hey, how do you help people? How do you be that ripple effect? Do it with the like and subscribe button, right? Because it costs you nothing, but it's that magical thing, the online stranger of me needs to really help get more good deeds done and help spread just some magic around the world. So super excited and grateful to everyone who stuck around and listened today. I cannot wait to share more stories with you, and I will see you next time.